Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready? Are you ready? Get ready, dog. Get ready.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Rocket Networker. I always like to begin with a silly networking story. Today's story is about building your personal network by volunteering your time to become an alumni chapter leader in support of your high school or college. A few years after graduating with my MBA, I had the honor of connecting with University of Toledo alumni in Los Angeles. A few years later, the company I worked for transferred me to the Metro New York City area. For over 20 years, I partnered with fellow UT alums to make personal contact with and schedule events for our fellow alums in the New York City area, Connecticut, New Jersey, Long Island, the 5 boroughs, and Manhattan. While we attended the University of Toledo at different times, we share a common bond through our love of the Rocket Nation. I've had the privilege of interacting with alums across the United States and around the world over the last 30 years. Their stories and success always amaze me. And that's where today's Rocket Networker guest comes in, Pete Travnicek. We met at a UT alumni event 2 decades ago. Over the years, Pete's career has taken him around the United States and most recently around the world. So Pete, thanks for joining us today. I know your schedule's busy, but I appreciate you being a guest on the Rocket Networker podcast.
Happy to be here.
So first off, let's start off. I see this kind of beautiful office setting. Where are you doing the podcast from?
Yeah, it is sunny Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. So nice. If your listeners or readers or viewers don't know where that is, don't be self-conscious. I probably couldn't have pointed to it on a map reliably, before a couple of years ago myself. But it's a really fascinating area of the world, especially these times. And I feel very fortunate that I can be exposed to this and expose my family to this in a very safe and an exciting way.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. There's a lot going on in the United Arab Emirates, that's for sure.
Indeed.
We're going to get into that during the course of the podcast today. We're going to get into your work there and what it's like actually to live there. I know you've been there a short time, but it's going to be fun to hear about your experience. But what I want to do here is I want to take our conversation back in time because as a Rocket Networker, what we like to do is teach people about the threads of connectivity. These are just the simple things that connect us in life to people. Trust comes from getting to know people. And the question is, how fast can we get to know people? And typically, we're not going to talk about work things and really build trust in the beginning, right, of a relationship. So I like to use the threads of connectivity, which gets us back in hometown and family and high school and college and just life experiences and community and volunteer groups we work in. So that's the backdrop of our conversation today, Pete. So let's go back. What's your hometown, man? Where are you from?
Mostly Columbus, Ohio. That's where I moved when we were 5 and grew up most of the time. Somewhat rural, but after the first year of high school, we moved to one of the more busier suburbs. Definitely busier now, but back in the late 80s, early 90s, Columbus was still a little bit more of a sleepy town. It'd been growing for a number of years, but I grew up. I went to high school in the Dublin area, although the school that I went to was on the west side, which in Columbus, Ohio terms, it was kind of the wrong side of the tracks, if you will, relative to Dublin or Upper Arlington or some of the newer tonier suburbs. But I really loved it. I mean, it was a great place to grow up. I feel very lucky to have grown up in the Midwest, especially from a foundation point of view. I think it just centers you in the right spot.
Well said. What high school? What was the name of the high school?
Bishop Reedy High School.
I got you. Now tell us a little bit about that. Were you involved in high school? Were you in glee club or chess club or football, soccer, or anything, band?
Yeah, I love sports. I just loved, when I was in middle school or grade school, I went to parochial schools growing up, and my mom, I was a single mom household raised by her and my 2 older sisters. So in some ways I had 3 moms in the house. which, we still laugh about that. My sister was just here a couple of weeks ago, and we laughed about that a couple of times. But the thing about growing up in that environment was, Bishop Reedy was. Well, actually, I want to go back. When I was in middle school, one of the priests told my mom said, this kid can either be two things. He's either going to end up as an executive somewhere, or he's going to be in jail. He's like, and it's going to depend on how busy you can keep him. Because I guess I was just a very active kid, and definitely ornery. And, an idle mind is the devil's playground. And unless I was busy or kept busy doing positive things and channeled in the right way, it was probably going to be pretty easy for me to stray and end up in a bad spot. Fortunately, I had a lot of people looking after me. And I think my mom did a great job. Not trying to be egotistical, but, looking back at what she did, as a single mother and creating a support network, it's just awesome. Feel very lucky.
When you were in high school and starting to think about life after high school, what was that like? What were you thinking about? Were you thinking always about college, or were you thinking about going to skilled trade or the military? What were you thinking about?
Yeah, I got to admit, at the age of 16 or 17, I was a bit of a knucklehead. And I don't think that's that unique, to be honest. I mean, looking around, there were a few kids that had their heads screwed on straight and had a pretty straight path to doing whatever, going straight to college or straight to whatever job they wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go to college. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do there. General idea, probably business, but I really love sports. I wanted to play baseball. And if I could spend my day from the sun up to sundown playing baseball, that's what I would have done. I sprinkled in some basketball there too, and learned. I took up running, was lucky I did that at that era. Kind of anchored myself at the age of 16 as being something that I do just to kind of clear my head and get out of the house in the morning, get your body moving. I didn't even know it. I was just doing it because I wanted to become, a better athlete, I guess. But here I am at almost the age of 50. I still feel the world is always a better place after a run.
Right,
when I finish a run in the morning, the first step is the hardest. After that, 5 minutes into it, the brain starts waking up. I start thinking about good things. Sometimes work problems get solved. Sometimes family problems get solved. Sometimes I just see things that make me really appreciate the surroundings. So I would say, going back to the original question, it was really centered around sports. I didn't do drama, although I see my kids doing some of those things now, and I really think that I would have been better served had I had more rounding there. But I mean, also it was the 80s. It's a different era. We didn't really have the smorgasbord of different opportunities. There wasn't something for everyone. Right. Really only a few things. And if you didn't fit into these very narrow buckets, you kind of got thrown out as an outcast. Right. That's just, maybe it was small. Maybe it was a small world, small environment, small school, but I feel like that's kind of the way it was then. We didn't have safe spaces for everybody. And that's unfortunate, but that was the reality.
That's true. So, all right. So you're into baseball, you're running, you're athletic. How did you decide to go to college? Like, what was the path? Did you end up going to play baseball? Is that what you wanted to do to get to college?
Yeah, that's exactly what the calculus was. It was, where can I play baseball? And that's what got me to college. That's what.
So now, what types of schools looked at you? Like, when you were going through the recruiting process, what types of colleges and universities did you talk to?
Admittedly, there weren't that many. I mean, I'm not as much as at the 18. Remember, a knucklehead. As much as I thought very high of myself, reality is it's hard to deal with sometimes.
It can be harsh.
It can be harsh. It can be harsh, but so I wanted to play D1. I was able to walk on at a D1 at the University of Akron, actually.
Okay.
And it was where I was for the first 2 years before I realized didn't feel like a good fit. And I'd visited some friends at Toledo, and something about Toledo, and I don't even know if I could put it, even a few words on it, but something about the way that it sits in a nice neighborhood. Although there was a nice side of the university, and then there was a less nice side of the university, but I really identified with that, just how it sat in the city, close proximity to a lot of things. Like the downtown was easy to get to, the suburb was easy to get to. You could go shopping, you could go to restaurants, or you could just stay on campus and live in a bubble. I just loved all of that optionality right at your fingertips. And it's also a very, like, it's a beautiful campus. It's just very visually appealing. Something about it, sometimes things just pull at your heartstrings or just feel right in your gut. And whenever I visited, I was like, this feels like college. This feels what my image of college should be like. And it lived up to that expectation. I loved my time there. I was there for 2.5, 3 years. Yeah. Yeah. I kind of had a sophomore and a half year, if you will, or I had, 2 senior years, depending on which way you want to buffer it. You can pitch that sail however you'd like. But ultimately I finished in 5 years. It could have been 4.5 years, but I was not in any hurry. So the knucklehead at age 17 wasn't completely removed at the age of 22, 23. A lot of it had been beaten out of me. Going back to the reality can be harsh thing. But I also wasn't in that big of a hurry. I know what working at that point. I knew what working felt like, looked like. I knew I was capable of doing it. I knew I wanted to do it. But I also realized at that point, you only get a couple of windows in life where you have this mix of very low responsibilities, and you have the ability you have time on your side, and if you're lucky, you have some money on your side. So I saved up enough money by working a couple different jobs my senior and a half year, because I only had one class my last semester. So I just doubled down and saved up, I don't know, $5,000 or $10,000 at the time. And I knew I wanted to travel afterwards. So it set me up for that experience, because also it goes back to the bubble of a world that I was living in, very small environment. I knew I wanted to see more of the world. And that was my window to do it before I, hunkered down and got to work, rolled up my sleeves and really got to work. So I did that after graduation. It was fantastic.
When you got to Toledo, then did you keep playing baseball, or did you stop and get involved?
No, my baseball was over at that point. And that was a tough transition, but it was also a little bit liberating too, because I could then focus on what was going to be. I mean, I wasn't going to play shortstop for the New York Yankees. That was pretty darn clear. And I even think that was pretty clear at the age of 18, but it was very clear at the age of 20. Abundantly clear. And I don't know. I think it was a good thing to just focus on academics. And I had plenty of fun too. Don't make me mislead you into thinking that I was an honor roll straight A student and all I did was go to the library on Friday and Saturday nights. I enjoyed myself for sure. And Toledo lends itself very nicely to that. At least it did in the mid 90s.
Yeah. So take us to now your second senior year, as you referred to it, at Toledo.
Yeah.
What were you thinking there, career-wise? Do you remember back, like when you were in your last couple of semesters, what?
Yeah.
Graduations come. What were you thinking?
Yeah, great. Wow. And these are some things that I haven't given a ton of thought to, because you
just lived it.
Yeah, you live it. And then every now, like before grad school, I think I thought about that. Like, what really at the core did you like about that? But right. Then life comes over, you have kids and move across the world. What did I started to think about, I had an internship. I knew I liked finance. There was something about discounted cash flows that got me it's really nerdy, but it got me kind of excited. Also, compound interest I thought was super exciting. I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is fantastic. It's just math.
Yeah, compound interest and baseball have a lot in common. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you can see the transition, right?
It makes total sense to me.
So I had an internship with a retail stockbroker, and that market, even in that era, was kind of a dwindling space. Technology was coming in, taking over, but it was a great eye-opening experience. I think the element of sales kind of struck a chord with me. But I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do it in either Chicago or New York. Because it goes back to like what about Toledo felt good. It was, growing up somewhat rural. I liked cities. Something about that just felt right. And I wanted to live in a larger city because, again, in life I've continuously overpaid for options, good, bad, or otherwise. But I like having optionality. And Chicago was a really natural transition post Toledo. I had some friends that had gone there. They graduated in their proper 4 years, not the fifth year like me. So they'd already set up. They had apartments. They had a place for me. But then because I traveled, I met someone, and women have powers of persuasion, and I ended up moving to New York instead of Chicago. Which
So you back up for one second. So you left. You were thinking to go to Chicago, but then
I was certain in May of 1998.
Okay.
When I finished, I was like, all right, I'll come back in the fall and I'll move to Chicago and I'll find a job. I don't care if I have to bartend while I find the real job. I could wait tables. It's fine. I'm not too proud for that stuff.
Right.
Find a job and we'll go from there. Because at that time, also the exchanges, I knew I kind of wanted a Wall Street type experience or a sales and trading. The pits were still a big deal at the time.
Yeah.
And the Chicago Options Exchange and the Board of Trade were really
a lot of action
places. I liked. I mean, that place felt great. So I figured I could stumble into a job there and work my way up and see what happened. But
so then you didn't do that. So you end up landing was that like your kind of first job after college was in New York?
Sort of. I had a temp job while I saved up because when I finished traveling, I was kind of broke. I came home.
Hold on a second. So you graduated. Sounds like you traveled. Did you take some time off and travel right after graduating?
Yeah, I spent 6 months doing the European backpacking experience, which was fantastic. It really scared the crap out of me.
I'm sorry. Did you go with friends, or would you just go by yourself and go alone?
I went solo. I met a fair number of people along the way. One of which encouraged me, of course, successfully to move to to the New York City area instead of Chicago. But it was great. I mean, I was this small town kid that realized that there was a lot more to the world that I wanted to see. And
you said it. I cut you off a minute ago. You started to say it scared you. Let's go back there. Yeah. What was it? Just being alone there and not speaking the language? What was it that got kind of made you nervous?
I think that there was a certain aloneness. If I figure I got to New York City without a flight to London. I knew I wanted to go to London. I knew I had a rail pass that was good from the time that I started it, whenever I got there. I had a fixed number of dollars, and this was the first time I'd been out of the country on my own. I mean, it's the first time I think I'd used my passport. So it was all of those things, and no one in my family had done anything like this before. So it was the first time for everything. So, all right, how do you get to London? How do you know where to stay? And this was in the really early days of internet. So unless you had a phone number of a hostel, or you had a phone number of somebody you knew there, and even then, it's not like you had a mobile phone. You could call them. Like now we can. I land, I turn on my SIM card. All right, I'll pay Verizon or whoever it is my extra $5 a day to get access to this country. Not the case. Like you had to get, a card when you landed, or feed money into the payphones. And anyway, so all that was just like, land in London. What do I do now? Get my bag? Where's the subway? And these weren't things where you could just pull up Google Maps, right? None of this stuff existed. So it was, at the time it was just a lot more unknowns. And that's what scared me.
I get that, especially with the phone. And they're not having, like you said, Google and instant access to things. You actually had to talk to human beings to say, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like which way is north and south? Like you get out of a subway, or you get out of the airport, or you get off of a bus somewhere.
Yeah.
I can read a map. I mean, which is now I think is a bit of a dying skill.
Right.
Reading a physical map, but that's an advancement. We have now these devices which are fantastic.
Right.
But how do I even know which way is east and west?
Right. Now,
you have to ask someone. Yeah.
Exactly. So it sounds like, so you went to London, and then where did you go? Did you stay in London the whole time, or did you go to Europe?
No. I didn't really stay anywhere for more than a few days. I wanted to get around and see things because I figured if I really liked someplace,
right,
I could come back. But I won't be able to cover that much territory. Again, this window of opportunity where you have very little or no responsibilities. I think my student loans didn't kick in for another 6 months after graduation. So I had that window.
Right.
And, where can I cover? What are all these places that I've read about or heard about or that I've seen movies?
What was your favorite of looking back on it? What were your top 2 or 3 favorite places?
Yeah, there's definitely some places that were memorable, and largely due to the people that I either met there or experienced with while I was there. Berlin was really fascinating. I just felt like there's certain cities where you step off, you step on the sidewalk and it feels like you had a double espresso. I don't know how to explain it. Like some cities just have that and some do not.
Yeah.
Like Paris has it. I felt like Berlin, New York definitely has it.
Yeah.
But you get out of like Houston, no offense to Houston. I don't feel like that's there. Even in Abu Dhabi, it's not electric.
Right.
Like that.
Right.
Some cities in the world just have it.
Like when you look into like Dubai, it visually is, but when you get on the ground, there's just so much stuff going on. But like in New York, you just feel like, I remember, coming out from New Jersey, I'd get up in the morning, I'd come off, the train at Penn Station, and I just felt it. That's why when you just said that, I'm like, man, I get it.
There's just something, yeah.
Locals hated like Times Square, right? If you live in New York City, like, man, I don't want to go in there, too many people. It's trying to get home from work, right? Trying to get the subway or the train or whatever. Me, I would intentionally go out of my way to walk through. I could just feel the electricity, just like plugging into an electric outlet. You know what I mean?
And some people are turned off by that. I get, because there's a bit of a claustrophobia,
overwhelming,
or overwhelming. Too many. It's sensory overload.
Yes.
But for me, there are things that wake up inside me that are just. I just love it. Yeah. It's like manna. It's like food for the soul. It just makes me feel more alive.
I'm right with you, man. We may be alone in that. Here with the Rocket Nation and people watching the Rocket Network, they may be shaking their head like, man, those are 2 crazy guys. But no, for me, I'm the same. I like it. I used to go to Europe for work. It was the same thing. Yeah, I'd fly into Frankfurt, Germany, and I'd get off and get on the train there, and I just could feel it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So, well, it's also Rick.
Go ahead.
I think also there are different phases of life where that sort of electricity is more appealing than others.
No question.
So, single, again, no real responsibilities or limited responsibilities is different from even married. And now you have 2 people, somebody else's experiences you need to take into account. Right. Or then when you have children or dependents, then it's like, well, now it's not just me getting off the plane trying to figure out which direction to go. It's these other,
right,
ducklings following me, and I need to have that extra element of confidence or just have my stuff together.
Right. You got to protect.
So
right.
It takes away, it's a different type of excitement, but I've got kids now, and my wife and I get really excited about that. The kids feel like we drag them around like luggage sometime, but I feel like they're gonna, in the long run, it's very much a delayed or a deferred appreciation. That's what I'm banking on, at least. That's what I tell myself.
That's your story, and you're sticking to it, right?
Absolutely, until my dying day.
Right. All right. So you like the Berlin thing? Really quick on that, Berlin. You were in Berlin not long after the wall was down and all that. Maybe 8 to 10 years. I mean, you were there.
It came down in 91, I think. No, 89.
Yeah, right in the late 80s.
89, and I was there in 98. So less than a decade. It was, and part of that rawness is what I liked, because there was a lot of industrious, like it had started to take new shape. You
It
know,
was an
or parts of.
entrepreneurial. Did you feel that was an entrepreneurial? I mean, you were obviously right out of college, so maybe didn't connect as much, but
Yeah, I just felt more of like the exuberance, like the youthful. It just felt like
yeah,
people were awake. Um, yeah, a lot of bicycles running around. You know,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
yeah,
I went. It's funny. I had the opportunity to go to for work to Poland and spend some time there in Warsaw and the surrounding suburbs. And it was the same way. It was the Wild West. They were running and gunning, and they had tasted freedom, and it was pretty cool. It was a lot of energy. You know what I mean? It's the same thing because they'd gotten rid of the boot off their neck, and they were finally just going crazy in the business community. They're having a good time. So yeah,
yeah, and that filters through everything, right? Not just how you feel when you're with your family or your friends, but also how you feel when you're in the workplace. You know, it just permeates through everything, and it becomes this whole new. It's like it changes your track now. You start opening up and being awake to more experience, more things.
right, exactly. So all right, so now you're in Europe. You're having a good time. All of a sudden, you would have stayed for probably the rest of your life doing that, but the money ran out. And
Yeah,
how you come from Europe? Did you come right back to New York City, or did you come back for a time to Ohio? Like
I
what was?
came back for time. I came back for a time to Ohio, knowing that was going to be a temporary. So I got a job at Chase Manhattan Mortgage, a 6 month temporary job. It was a little bit gut wrenching. It was like doing foreclosures,
Got it.
which my first experience into the business world or real world. Doing that over the holidays was especially cruddy.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's like it's like being a bond bailsman or a bondsman or something like that, or um, it's just part of the process, right? Like I didn't default on the mortgage. I didn't even give them a mortgage. I needed to put one thing.
so it's similar to when you're an executive or a manager and you end up laying people off or closing off office or plan. I mean, people that have never done it before, they think it's easy for someone, and it's not. You carry the memories. I had some opportunities, unfortunately, to deal with that in my career, and you carry them with you on the holidays. Even for me, 30 years later, I still Thanksgiving's good for my family, and I enjoy being around the family. But in the back of my mind is the layoff we did, in the mid '90s, laid off 1,000 people, on the
Yeah,
Monday before Thanksgiving. So that thing resonates in my brain still. So I'm sure
that's
you.
the human connection. You can't get around it. We're not computers.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a tough thing, and like you said, I didn't set that business into the environment that caused that need for that layoff, but I inherited it and had to, with other managers and leaders, had to deal with that, and
Yeah,
it's a human thing. So, all right. So
yeah.
now,
So
were you in Columbus dealing with that, or
yeah, I was in Columbus, living in moved back home for a brief bit. Swallowed my pride there because I left. After my sophomore year, I spent the summers at school.
right,
I was out of the house. I was done.
right,
But I worked during the day, a regular work day, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever it was, and then I waited tables almost every night because
right,
I needed to save money because I knew I wanted to move to New York.
right,
And as much as I would have loved to have transitioned from Chase in the foreclosures department to something in the capital markets group, they weren't hiring, or maybe they just weren't hiring me. But typically they have their own tracks for hiring undergrads, and it wasn't Pete Travnicek from the University of Toledo with a finance degree.
right.
It was somebody from Princeton or UC Berkeley or wherever it is. I mean, a lot of great schools. I'm not bemoaning it. That's just the reality of it. So moved there without a job
Yeah,
in
that's tough stuff.
February.
So now you're in Columbus now. What was the transition from there? Did you go from there to New York City, or?
Yeah, yeah, I did. I went from there with whatever I could fit in my Toyota Corolla, passed right through Pennsylvania into New Jersey, and set up camp ultimately in Hoboken.
Okay, I was asking next where you go. So you lived in Hoboken then?
Yep, and found probably maybe a month in.
Yeah.
I got a temp job at Bankers Trust,
Okay.
which was on the way out because Deutsche Bank was buying them, and most of the talent, if not all of the talent, was leaving. And in that era too, that was 99,
Right.
early 99. So the dot-com era was still in full bursting. It was like going gangbusters.
Yeah.
So the war for talent, remember back at that time,
Yeah.
the smart brains, the talent was going to tech companies.
Yes.
And to some degree that's carried over for a long time, but at that time it was unique.
Yeah.
And Wall Street was not really getting the first crack of the bat at the top tier graduates. So I feel like I kind of snuck in through the back door, and it was a back office job. So it's not like anybody was really clamoring for that, but I needed to eat.
Right.
And I got in the back office and, kind of worked my way up. And it was a great place to start.
So now, how long were you in the city then? How long were you in New York City?
I was there total 8 years.
I got you. Now, and how many different companies did you work for in that 8 years?
If we cut, it would be 3. If we count Bankers Trust and Deutsche Bank as one company.
Right.
And then I moved to JP Morgan after just about a year, a little less than a year at that first job.
Right.
JP Morgan is what I kind of consider my anchor. It's what gave me the foundation for how to work, what work looks like, feels like. It was a great place to learn. And then after that, I got a little bit more aggressive and went to an interdealer broker. So banks typically don't face each other on the trading desk. They go through an intermediary. So I became one of those intermediaries, or at least attempted to. Didn't work out that great, which is what got me to grad school.
All right.
I thought I'd cleared that hurdle, in my time at JP Morgan, but everybody has their own path. And at the age of 32, I started business school.
So where did you go to business school from there? You went to get your master's? Is that what you did? Or
I did, yeah. In touring business schools, like Notre Dame goes back to like what feels right. It's one of those that just the moment I stepped there, and I grew up going to Catholic schools, so Notre Dame always had the mystique.
right.
And I don't know if it's like that in public schools, but it always carried a fair amount of weight in the circles that I grew up in. And it just felt great when I visited. It seemed like it was a way to get back out of the city. New York was still a bit foreign to me. There's just a call and response, like how people interact with each other. I think of it as more transactional,
Right.
and neither is good or bad. The
Right.
Midwest is more relationship, and in New York or the East Coast is a little bit more transactional. Largely, I suspect is because of necessity.
Right.
People don't really have the breathing room to give you your space to talk. Like, that's fine. You talk to yourself. I'm going to move on with my life. I have my own things. The Midwest is a little bit different. It's more, if you're at the checkout counter at a grocery store in the Midwest, if you don't talk to whoever's in front of behind you, it's considered somewhat rude.
Right.
Whereas if you do that in Midtown Manhattan, you're a lunatic. If you're talking to someone in front of you, like, what about you? What about me makes you think that I want to talk to you? Like,
Exactly.
go about your business, move on.
Leave me
So,
alone.
and so it felt good. Like coming back to the Midwest, it was a good way to get. It's a little bit closer to family, but I just wanted to separate from New York City for a bit to see, what the rest of the world looked like.
So now you're at Notre Dame, and you're getting your master's. Then, when you were coming out of the master's, then what were you thinking? Then what was the next step for you? Were you going back to New York City, or what were you thinking?
No, again, somewhat. It's a little bit due to the circumstance. I mean, I finished in 2009.
Okay.
And 2009 was not a great place to be in the in capital markets. That was fresh off of the great financial crisis.
Right.
I had some really, really talented classmates, friends that I saw struggling to find jobs. Definitely qualified. It's just circumstantial, wrong place, wrong time.
Right.
They ultimately settled, and everybody seems to have done just fine. But it was another one of those, you have so many windows of opportunity in life. And I had met who's now my wife, like in the last semester. So I decided to defer my job search, much to the chagrin of the career development office, because they get, their statistics get all screwed up.
Yeah. Right.
I was like, look, I'm holding tight here. I know what that job market looks like. It's not good. I don't want to participate right now. So I still had some savings left over. from New York because I guess I was a little bit more conservative. So there was a period of like 6 or 7 months where I had a great time. Moved to Chicago, spent beautiful time with my wife, got to know her family, set up the life that we now have or had before we moved here.
Right.
And it was great. And then there was about two or 3 months of involuntary unemployment because once I started looking for a job, it still was not that easy. But it did work out in like the spring of 2010, and it all worked out fine.
So now
I barely had to live off of a credit card for more than like 6 weeks.
That's all right. Right. So, where was that job right out like that? When you went back in, was that in Chicago or did you move somewhere else?
It was I was based in Chicago, but it was for a New York company that had a client that was in Chicago. Ultimately, I got that job, and the client went away very quickly. But I stuck with the company, and I was there for 12 years. It was great. I mean,
What was the name of that business?
It was Numerics. It was a fintech company, financial software, key ingredient in a lot of capital markets and trading desks.
Right.
An exotic calculator.
Right. So you said you spent 12 years there. Where were you living, like in the Chicagoland area?
Right downtown. So we were in the Ukrainian Village, or East Ukrainian Village, I guess is how they branded themselves, or West Town.
Right.
But very close to downtown. Again, goes back to like I like cities. I overpay for the options. I'm fine with that. My wife is of similar mindset. We like the city, and we, when we had our first, at the same time, right when he was being born, we were closing on a house in 2011 when nobody wanted to buy a house, but I had a decent job at that time, and I'd saved some money. I said, well, I want to fix this up. So we bought a house. It was basically a shell, 3 walls, and then we built it, and we were able to live there until we moved away in August of last year. We still have the house. Somebody else lives in it right now.
Right. That's cool.
Renting out.
A little bit about the transition now. So 12 years, you work with Numerics in Chicago. You're married. You've got kids, which we'll go back to in a minute. We're not going to end without talking family. But so talk about this transition to Abu Dhabi. Talk about that, about the job side of it, and then just the process you and your wife went through with that.
Yeah, I mean, if you would have told me even a year ago or 15 months ago that, hey, you're going to be in Abu Dhabi in March of 2024, like, nope, no way. It's a crazy talk. But I was doing some work for the company that I'm now with, called Halo Investing, and we specialize in protective investments, which it's like an investment product called a structured note. I don't want to get too deep into that stuff because it's kind of nerdy and probably not very relevant for 99.9% of the audience. Okay. But I was doing some work for companies here because one of our larger investors was based here. We had some prospects here, and the stuff I was working on in Chicago and in the US and Canada kind of translated very nicely here. So I was working some kind of screwy hours because of the time difference. So I was taking calls at like 4 a.m. or staying on until like midnight or 1 a.m., just whenever the time needed it. And then, one of the co-founders was here about a year ago and came back, and I got to know him really well, and we had a good relationship. And he was saying, geez, Pete, if you didn't have a family, I'd ship you over there and you'd have a great time. I was like, brother, I think my family would be into that. That's more of a carrot than a stick. And he was like, well, I'm only half joking. And I was like, well, I'm answering seriously. I think we would probably do something like that if we could get stars to align. And then one thing led to another, and I came out in May for us visit. My wife came and joined around a long weekend, and we were able to get the kids in school, which was the biggest variable.
Right.
And then laid down the groundwork to transition out of what was the old role and into the new role, and get the house on a shipping container. And
right.
That was a stressful couple months.
Yeah, that's moving over. Moving in the U.S. is bad enough. Moving overseas is a different game.
Yeah, it was. I don't want to have to do that again.
Yeah, right. I have that experience. I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, all right. Yeah. So let's transition a little bit into family and kids. And you started talking about getting the kids in school. How old are they? And talk about that. I'm fascinated. what's the process by which you get kids into school in Abu Dhabi? Like, how old?
Oh, um, yeah. So getting the kids in school, we have a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, 9-year-old, and a 7-year-old. So we had them all pretty tight. We had 4 within about 5.5 years. So
Okay.
very compressed time. Because we were both in our mid-30s when we met. We knew what we wanted to do at that point. And there's no way that we thought we were going to have 4. Let's have 1 and see how it goes. And then we're like, well, that was kind of fun. And we started popping out kids like it's Pez, like it's a Pez candy dispenser. And before you know it, here's 4 of them. And my wife said, you can keep having more kids if you want, but it's not going to be with me. And I like my wife. So I didn't want to upset that. And so we capped it at 4. And so getting them into school here was, it was a stressful, probably 2 or 3 weeks. But when I look back now, it was a compressed time zone. And I think because it was compressed, it was really stressful, and then it was gone. So the day that I landed, I think I landed on like a Thursday back in Chicago. It was the day after school finished, and they were all in Chicago public schools. So I had to drive to the school, landed, put my bags in the house. Sweetie, hi, I'm back. I got to go to the school to get their transcripts. So I had to do a lot of admin. It was transcripts, health records, scan them, upload them, do these. It was like doing 4 mortgage applications, essentially. But if anybody's filled out a mortgage application, it feels like a scavenger hunt. That's what I was. So that's why it was a very, very focused period of time. And then once I had all the things in, and the deadlines were really tight because I think their acceptance or their open window was closing like a week after I landed. And it's the American school here in Abu Dhabi, which is the oldest private school in Abu Dhabi. It was part of it was created from stemmed off of the embassy when it was originally established here in like 1972. So it's the OG, if you will, of schools. And it's where one of my colleagues here was sending his kid to school. So I figured, well, if you've done all this due diligence, you grew up here and this is where you've made your life. That sounds like a good testament. So my kids are probably going to go to the same school in proximity and where the office is and where we thought we want to live. It all kind of worked out nicely. But getting him to school, man, it was like doing a mortgage application.
Now, how's your wife? Is she working there, or is she obviously focused with the kids like you are? What is she doing, and how is she adjusting? Just out of curiosity, how
she's a beast. She's a beast. So, she tends to do most of the work in the evenings, back in the U.S. hours.
Right.
And I'm super appreciative. That's not lost on me, the fact that she is doing that so that I can do the job here. That's hard. Like, quite honestly, I mean, if you think of all the different boxes that you want to check in life of what is working well, that one is a tough one, admittedly.
Yeah, it's tough. You're at that age too. It's difficult because they're obviously making their own adjustment to being away from friends, being in a different country, different school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're going through their own, and just that age they're in, that age bracket your kids are in, is tough. Then when you add on the movement and everything else going on, it's tough. All of you are 6 of you are going through a great learning experience as a family.
But Rick, and I've heard this said hundreds of times throughout life, that how malleable and well-adjusted kids are, right? Yeah. Don't worry about the kids; they'll adjust.
Yes.
And if you've probably heard that in a lot of different contexts, and you're like, yeah, I'm sure, okay, maybe, but you don't know my kids, right?
Yeah. Right.
My kids are gonna have, and you know what? We landed on a Friday. They started school on a Monday. We had a bumpy day on Wednesday in that first week because it was August. I had just had shoulder surgery, so I was one-armed.
Yeah.
Anytime you step outside, it was like an oven just opened on your face.
Yeah.
And you know what? By that next weekend, they were fine.
Yeah.
Even living in a hotels for a month while we got our place sorted, they adjusted. And once we got into our neighborhood, they're the easiest to adjust.
Yeah. Yeah.
Worry not for them.
That's cool. So, a couple minutes left here. I could carry this conversation on with you. Know me. I could carry this
Yeah,
on for a long time.
barely scratching the surface, right?
This is, well, you know what? We'll do this again sometime. We'll do it again. We'll pick up and maybe talk a little work or something. But the point is with the audience here, with the Rocket Network, our audience is the conversation that Pete and I are having here. This is what networking is. It's a genuine compassion and caring for other people and selfless service to other people, and listening to their life and their stories and the things. And I think when you listen to some of the threads of connectivity, I've known Pete a long time. There's a lot of stuff we talked about today that little trinkets of things I did not know, like the baseball thing. And I didn't realize you'd gone to Akron and things of that nature, right? So the beauty of networking is you get to know people that are doing cool things. And obviously with Pete and his family in Abu Dhabi and their journey, we'll definitely pick this up again. Maybe we'll have one of your kids on and talk about what it's like to be a rocket networker in Abu Dhabi in the American grade school.
They'd love it.
They'd love it right now, right?
They'd love it. And Rick, I also feel like 90% of the airtime has been my vocal cords moving, and I haven't gotten really to hear much about what you've been up to. I'm super curious to see. You do interact. You are a master networker. I know you probably don't see it that way, but man, you are here, there, and everywhere. And I think what you say resonates with a lot of people, which is probably why you have so many people in your network, and so many people flock to your messages when you send them out, and how you get people to positively respond when you ask them for help.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. You know what? It's interesting. I hesitated to create a podcast because I'm an outgoing guy, as you know, and I think the audience picks up when they watch the Rocket Network podcast. But I don't like looking at myself on the screen, and I don't like hearing my voice because I look old and I sound weird.
We all do, man. We all do.
I love other people's stories, though. I love your story. And we're not even, like you said, we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah.
And, we'll continue this dialogue. And one of the things I like about what's going on with the Rocket Networker podcast is it's given us a fun opportunity. And my audience doesn't want to hear about me. They want to hear about cool people like you and your wife and your kids. What it is it's simple. And I don't mean that your life is simple, because it's complicated, right? Your life in general is complicated, but just you're living the day. You have an opportunity to move to Abu Dhabi, you weigh it, you think about it, you just go with it. Most of the people that we interact with, especially as we get older, when you ask them about their life journey, they had no idea they would be where they're at today, me included, right? And you said that a few times during the session today. So I'm just appreciative of your friendship. I'm appreciative of you being a great representative of the Rocket Nation, and that you and your wife are just living the dream and living life. It's cool. It's very cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think people tend to regret, myself included, I guess, the things that we don't do. It's not so much that we regret the things we do, because even when you screw up, you learn a lot, and then you don't screw up it as much the next time.
Yeah.
Wash, rinse, repeat, get better.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And if you have folks that are interested in learning more about this region, I would love nothing more than to be a host, or to be an ear, or an answer, if people have questions about, because this region it's on the up. I felt like this well before I moved, that man, there just seems to be more and more activity happening in this area of the world. And ignore the socio-political part of it, and then the religious part of it. Put all that aside. You don't need to make it complicated. There's a lot of activity. The wave, there is such a positive wave in this region, and the openness that the UAE has. It's like nothing. There's a down the street from me. There is a Jewish temple, there is a mosque, and there's a Catholic church, all within 50 meters of each other, and it's beautiful. Like, it is just.
It should be. Exactly.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So let me ask you one last question then. So we're going to flash forward, hopefully another 80 or 90 years, and you're going to be an old man at that point, and you can look back. What's your legacy? What's the legacy of Pete Travnicek going to be? You thought about that?
Hey, I have, and that's the thing that sometimes wakes me up at 4 a.m. Like, geez, what's the point?
Yeah.
I don't honestly don't know, brother. I feel like in some ways it's my children, but then I start to chastise myself like that's the easy way out because congratulations, you procreated, you and the other 8 billion people on the planet.
Right.
Right? Great. That's really unique. So I don't know. I don't know what the lasting piece will be. I
Right.
know I have a lot of energy. I know I feel like I try to put it to good use, but there's still a lot more that, the product market fit. I don't know. I don't think Pete's product market fit on the planet has quite been established.
Right. Well,
And
hey,
it's my job to figure that out, quite honestly.
keep living the journey. It's interesting. I'm at a point in my age where a lot of my friends and folks around me in my career are retiring. And it's something I just don't really have interest in. There's too many good things going on in the world. There's too many people that need help. There's too many fun things. And people say, well, don't you want to slow down? I'm like, yeah, I do, but I'm not sure if God wired me that way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody has their own path, right? You're probably someone that will enjoy working until you can't.
Yeah, because it's not work to me. I enjoy what
You'll
I'm doing.
continue producing.
Yeah, it's just fun. It's fun to help other people, and I'm a big fan of that. So,
Yeah.
well, I tell you what, we'll definitely pick this up in another episode because there's a lot more fun stuff to talk about. And from the day you and I met, I've always thought you're a bright star and going to have a great future. And here we sit 20 years later, and you are. You're still a bright star, and it sounds like your wife and your kids are as well. So you just keep fighting the good fight, man. I appreciate you.
It's very kind of you. Very kind of you. And the feelings are mutual, Rick. It's been a good path together, and I look forward to many more years.
That's fun. Well, I tell you what, that's the end of our episode today, and like I said, I just want to thank you for sharing your journey with us, and that's it. That's it for this episode of the Rocket Networker. And like we always say at the Rocket Networker, it's time to launch connections to ignite your success. And here's my question for you in the audience: are you ready? To schedule a Rocket Networker training program or keynote speech, go to rocketnetworker.com. It's time to launch connections to ignite your success. Are you ready?